some of you know that I'm working on writing a book. Actually, I have a young man who's writing the book for me about my life. And so I've had to go back and review different events. And as I do that, it causes us to reflect. And when you reflect, you begin to think about, well, how effective was that? How did that really work? And it's good once in a while. We don't want to get too introspective to where we're just always investigating what am I doing with my life. But there are times when it's good to reflect over our life and look back and say, well, how did that season of my life work out? What did I learn through that season of my life? And what was God trying to show me? What did I learn from what he showed me, from the experiences he brought me through? So let me give you some illustrations for me. Way back when I was entering high school, junior high school, actually here in Mineral Ridge High School, I was in a wheelchair. So you'll see that the principal of the junior high at that time made some special arrangements. And you can see on this slide that there's a couple of young men carrying me up and down the steps. And that's what Mr. Rummel did. He, on his own, he could have signed me out and said, well, he's going to have to be on home tutoring. But God worked in his life. I really believe God guided him. I met with him a few years ago to review how much I appreciated, let him know how much I appreciated what he had done, because that kept me in public school for the rest of my secondary education, all the way to graduation from high school, whereas I would have been home getting tutored and not as well prepared to deal with college or any of the other experiences that God had provided for me later in life. So he not only allowed me to stay in school, but he made arrangements where students were carrying me up and down the steps, because the high school at that time had no elevator. It had 3 or 4 different floors, a variety of the construction that had been added on. So there was a lot of steps to manage every day. And the students were allowed to carry me. We got to get out of class 5 minutes early. Of course, that meant I had no problem getting volunteers because we got to walk out of class. And for 5 years, I think it was 5 years, from the 8th grade on through to 12th, I had that way of getting through school. And it opened up a door for me in terms of my education that I would not have had otherwise. At the time, I didn't really think about that. I probably would have been just as happy to stay home if it was left up to me. Like, oh, wow, cool, I don't have to go to school. But now I can see how valuable that provision was. God provided something there for what he had in store for the next piece of my life. And the next step in my life was college. When I got into college, I got involved with a group called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, and they brought me into a Bible study, and I said, well, this is great. And they said, well, okay, we want you to start one in your dorm. And then they invited us to go out and talk to other students from dorm room to dorm room, and a variety of different activities. And probably that was a real growth time for me. Again, God provided the challenge and the encouragement of others. Now, another thing that was happening during that time is we got active in music. We started really in high school, and many of you know that Ron and my brother Jerry and I had a singing group. Actually started with my sister too. There were 4 of us, and then there were 3. And so this picture shows us when we were 3, and this is really most of the singing that we did as the Mellotones. And we mostly were visiting churches. But did we really understand the idea of what we were ministering about? We liked singing. We liked making nice harmonies. We had fun with our sound systems and all the different things we were learning about. It was an exciting time of life, traveling around, getting to go to different cities, different churches, cutting a record. That's the old, big old records, you know, the big ones, the vinyl ones they talk about. I understand that's coming back to some degree. So, Ron, maybe there's a chance. Well, the next slide shows another big area where God opened up a door. I graduated from college, and then it was time to look for a job. Now, mind you, I had polio as a child, so at this point in my life, I was walking on crutches, and there was a significant disability, and that was before ADA, so there was no requirement of any employer to hire me. And I already had experiences where I had applied for work and been told, well, you know, we like you, but we can't have you because you're handicapped. And that was the word that was used back then. Now we've changed our words a little bit, but that was the common word then. And so I knew that that was something I'd have to deal with. One of my friends had gotten a job at Children's Services in Trumbull County, and she said, oh, I think they'll hire you. They're looking for new employees, new caseworkers, and you need to meet the boss. And so I'm thinking, how can I do that? And she says, well, you know what? We go camping every so often, and that would be a great time for you to meet him. And so as it turned out, I knew the place where they went camping, which is, they called it primitive camping, and it was primitive, way out on a farm about a mile off the road. So I went to the farmhouse, and I knew the man who owned the property through InterVarsity. I had met him before, and again, I say by coincidence, but really it was God's providence. And so here's this man, he knows me, and he knows I want to meet the guy that's a mile back on the property, taking some of the teenagers from the children's home on a camping weekend. And he's like, well, I'm sorry, Vince, but this is spring of the year. You can't drive your car back there. You'll get stuck in the mud. And you can't walk a mile. And I don't think, yeah, you're right. I can't walk a mile, that's for sure. Well, I don't know how we're going to get you back there. I just don't. And we're struggling and looking at one idea. He had a tractor. I wanted him to let me ride his tractor, but he was like, no, I don't think so, Vince. I tried to tell him that I drove my grandpa's tractor when I was only 13 years old. I don't know if he believed me or not, but at any rate, he wasn't going to take a chance. And so finally he said, well, I do have this yard tractor that we cut the grass with. Maybe you could drive that. I'm like, oh, gee, that was the dream of my life, to have a riding mower. When I was 16, I thought if I could have a riding power mower, I would be the coolest guy. Really cool, Judy, really cool. And I thought all the girls would love me as I would go riding by their home on my riding mower. Hey, that's cool, Vince, Well, anyways, this was my chance. So he let me ride his riding mower. So I get on this riding mower and head back the path to get where they were camping. And of course, I have my crutches, so when I get there, I can get off. Well, years later, the boss tells the story of how he first met me. And he says, we were out there camping, and all of a sudden I heard this putt, putt, putt coming over the hill. And I look up, and there's this shadow in the sunset. I can see a little lawn tractor with somebody sitting on it, holding a couple of sticks in his hand. And I'm wondering, what is this? And at the end, that was Vince Stigliano that I met. Now, he was impressed by that. Now, I didn't plan that. Okay, I had no idea that this was going to convince him that even though I had this disability, I might be able to take a job where I'd have to make home visits and climb upstairs and get into homes and all kinds of difficult situations. But really, that was a feature and what influenced the boss and the others that interviewed me to give me a chance at the job. Again, God's providence. He had a plan, and he purposed that. I was just sort of floating along hoping somebody would hire me. So the last picture I have for you is of the love of my life, dear Cheryl, who came into my life. We had known each other since we were kids, but really not until I was 30 years old did she really become a part of my life. And we got married when I was 31, and that really she has been my strength, my support, my constant helper in time of need. That still continues to this day. And she could tell lots of stories, and we won't get into all those stories because some of them are not necessarily complimentary to me, but she's been a faithful wife. She really has. And we thank God for our 2 children, and God has blessed them too. But God had something in store for me. Often when I'm counseling with people, I recall with them that the years from the age of 23 till the age of 31, 8 years of my life, those were the longest years of my life that I agonized over. I'm never going to find a wife. I'm never going to have the privilege of being married. It's going to be a whole part of my life that'll be missing. And I desired that tremendously. And I felt I needed it. And I do believe that's just part of my personality. I'm not a loner by any means. And I tried to make my own way because I thought there was another person that was God's called, that God had called her to be my wife. She was wise enough to see that that wasn't God's calling, but I struggled with that and pursued her for quite a while to my own frustration. One of the things I learned to do in these various processes in my life was I look at each year and I ask God, is there something new you want to do in 2022? God has something for me to do in this, my 76th year of life. He has something for me to do. I don't know for sure all of what it is. I have some ideas. One of the ideas is this book that we're working on. But there's other things. There's going to be other things. And it's my job to just remain open as I've shared you my story It's only as an example. There's nothing there that's really about me. It's about what God did. As I said, I was just floating along, looking and happy when certain things happened and sad when certain things didn't happen. But now I can see God had a plan. God was working things out in a way that I could never have imagined.